Hi, I'm Caitlin E, and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we are doing my 5-star wrap-up. I can't believe we made it. Let's see together how good I am at predicting my own 5-star future. Not that great. Many months ago, I want to say this was back in like April? May maybe? I posted my 5-star predictions video, and I didn't have a ton of them. I'm actually very uncomfortable trying to predict my 5-star favorites because I think a 5-star rating is such a slippery, difficult thing to pin down. It's not as like mathematical. I wish I was one of those people that could like use the core pile system. Maybe I'll try that at some point, but honestly, like it's really a 5-star rating is about like the depth of my emotions and like how intensely I cared about something. And so it's really hard knowing very little about what a book entails to make that kind of prediction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the 5 of my predictions and just talk you through it a little bit. What did I end up giving that? Like either why did it achieve the 5-star or why it definitely did not. And I'm going to go about this in chronological order in terms of like when I read them. So we have 5 books to go through. Let's get to it. The first book that I gave a 5-star prediction to was Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And the really quick and dirty reason why I thought this was going to be a winner is because I really have loved the Illuminae files as a series. The first book, Illuminae, definitely got a 5 stars from me, and I tend to think books or series that got a 5-star once could do it again. And then, I just had high hopes for the end of this trilogy. And I was right. I did give it a 5-star, although I do think, to be fair, that this is a 5-star that has a lot to do with like the emotions of finishing this series. So for me, I think this is a great example of like an emotional driven 5-star rating. I laughed really hard at this book. I also cried a lot, which I was not prepared for, even though I do think with this book in particular, as opposed to like the whole of the series, there's a lot you can kind of see coming because each of these books does follow almost a bit of a formula in terms of plot and, like the way that it's going to end. And so there were definitely things that I could predict in this book, but there were still some that I didn't see coming and that I didn't fully predict. I think it's the second strongest in the series. I still think the first book is by far the most original and inventive of the 3. But there are moments where this is like a little convenient, but it still pulled so much emotional reaction out of me. Like, I laughed, I cried, I just devoured this book, and I'm really, really a big fan of the series overall because I love mixed media storytelling. I'm not going to focus too much on summary of each of these books because I have mentioned their summaries very frequently, both in the TBRs where I originally picked them and the wrap-ups where I've done the full content. This is really about like what made this a 5-star rating, or in some cases not. So this one definitely was a 5-star for me. I accurately predicted this 1 for 5. And for some reason, I remember doing this very close together. Like, I think I doubled down on my Kristoff one month. And so I read the other of my Kristoff 5-star predictions, which was Nevernight. So this is, obviously he wrote this solo. This is not a joint author duo. This is his probably most famous series, I would argue, as a solo author. And this is the first book in that series. I wanted to give this a 5-star initially because I thought like, wow, some of the people that I adore on BookTube really love this book and I have similar tastes to them. Specifically people like Becca and the Books was somebody that I heard just like positively raving about this. And she got me really interested in this series initially. And I thought like, okay, it's got a lot of tropes that I really love, like female assassins, school, because there is an assassin school in this, and which I find any sort of like assassin school or like night school or like witchcraft school, just fancy school, fancy scary school. I like it. So that was why my impressions were leading me to believe that this would be a 5-star rating. This was a 4-star and kind of a contentious 4-star for me. I won't go into all the depth of the criticism I offered in this novel, because I feel like I did quite a lot of that in my wrap-up and during the vlog where I read this, so I don't want to just completely continue to repeat myself. However, the really nutshell versions of why this did not make it to the 5-star for me was that I wasn't fully thrilled with Kristoff's, like, the way he describes women's bodies is kind of a little frustrating. It's also the racialized way he describes people, sometimes really, I can't get past it. So I could probably have pushed this lower on the rating. What kept it at a 4-star for me is I really do like his quirky utilization of writing style. Like, throughout this book, there are a ton of footnotes, and it's like some mysterious commentator that you can start to like guess at who the identity of that commentator might be. They're often notes about history or about characters' internal lives, and it's just like a really interesting breakup on the page between the story itself and the footnotes, and how sometimes those narratives inform one another or completely subvert the other. So it also has one of the tropes that I really don't like in here, to go back for things that frustrate me. She's not that pretty, but also she's gorgeous. Just give it a second, it'll kick in, you know, like that kind of plain girl, not plain girl trope. I hate it so much. So that is also a problem for me. But I do really like the writing style and the footnotes. I do like the characters. I'm really interested to see where they go, so I'm going to be continuing with the series. It's not a failure by any means. It has one of my, on the flip side, one of my favorite tropes, which is like magical talking animals. Like, Mr. Kindly as a character in this book is a like shadow cat that is Mia's like familiar, more or less, like her pet, her friend, her advocate. I'm not even really fully sure how to best describe it without giving a ton of spoilers, but his name is Mr. Kindly. He's a black cat. He talks. He's very sassy, and I love him. I love that as a trope. Especially in, obviously, fantasy novels. So while I'm not giving this a 5-star rating, or I haven't given this a 5-star rating, it is a series that I'm interested in continuing on with. So it's not like a disappointment in terms of my reading life. Just wasn't a 5-star. And then I read what is probably my most disappointing book out of the set, and that is Master of Crows by Grace Draven. So here's why I thought this would be 5 stars. I thought that I would just really connect with Draven's writing. I loved her book Phoenix Unbound. It's one of my favorite like romantic fantasy spaces. She's more of like an indie published type of person, and I really liked her writing style. I really liked how she wrote about trauma and emotional depth in the midst of romance and fantasy and adventure, and so I really trusted in her character development. This has been on my radar even before I read Phoenix Unbound, so it was kind of like this long-term, hey, I'm intrigued by the world you're presenting in this book, which is a fantasy landscape with a lot of magic and a fighting of a great evil, you know, like all of these great fantasy tropes that I thought would really vibe well with me. Now, I didn't dislike this. I don't mean to misrepresent my actual review of this book. It is a 3-star rating for me. I am, however, pretty disappointed in it because I had such high hopes, because I was banking on this being a 5-star read, even though it was probably one of my more wishy-washy attempts at prognostication. I wanted to like this so much more than I did. So I still enjoy this. If you like Grace Draven, I still recommend giving this a go. If you like fantasy with some heavy romance elements, still give this a try. I don't think this is a bad book. It just didn't meet my expectations. So I think it had like some good smut and like good sensuality, which I think Grace Draven does well. It's not like a full-fledged romance novel or an erotic romance where there's a lot of it, but when it's there, it's done really well. You're in Silhara's head, who is the mage tempted by evil, and then you are also in Martise's head, who is the serving woman who is there to help him try to fight this evil and also spy on him for an outside force at the same time. So it's kind of enemies to lovers, although they're never like fully fledged enemies. They just have some enmity. So I don't really think enmity to lovers is a trope, but this is what this is. It is like slightly emotionally driven, but not as much as the success that I identified in Phoenix Unbound is like really working for me. So this also has one of those tropes that I just, it's again that like, oh, she's so plain, but then suddenly I see her for real and she's beautiful. I don't like that. And this is literally, I want to say like a third of the book is anytime that anybody has anything to say about Martise, it's how plain she is and like how plain she is. And apparently she has a lovely voice, like a very sensuous, husky, stunning voice. So anybody is always just like, oh, her voice is like the sexiest thing about her. And she's got a great body, but her face, you know, like, screw you. Screw you for this characterization. Like, it's awful. I don't like it. It is plain girl trope sucks. It sucks hard. Because I just think it's so heavy-handed. That's what I want to say about it. It's not that like people that aren't conventionally attractive don't deserve to be written about. It's not like that. It's just, it always ends up feeling like so self-serving for the author and like heavy-handed and like BS, you know, like this is, it's not for me, at least as a reader, it's not a comforting or fun fantasy space of like, oh, he really sees inside her. It's like, no, he's a dick to her for half the novel. And then when he decides he'd like to dick her in a different way, he's totally fine with her. I don't like this shit. So this is why I struggled and ended up giving it a 3-star read, is because that is so much of this book. The fantasy space is really cool. The world building's really interesting. I'm being very harsh on this book because it has a trope that I very strongly resent. But it is a decent fantasy romance. I think the 3-star rating has a lot more to do with my like disappointment based on my expectations than anything else. Of all the books that I'm talking and reviewing with you today, this is the book that ended up in my maybe box for my wrap up, where I still need to think about whether or not I want to keep this. So we'll see. We'll see when I unpack that box whether or not this stays or goes, but this is the only book, spoiler alert, in this video that I'm unsure about its place in my life. So far, we're still at only one book that I successfully predicted. Nostradamus, I am not. Then shortly after Master of Crows, I decided to pick up Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. And reasons why I thought this would be a 5-star read. I really loved Little Fires Everywhere. It was one of my favorite reads of 2019. So again, connecting author writing style, doesn't guarantee anything, but it doesn't hurt either, especially when you connect to a specific author's style so much like I did with Little Fires Everywhere. And so that was really the core basis of why I thought that this was going to be a 5-star read. And it got close. It got close. This was a 4-star read. And again, I'm not going to go into a ton of summary because you have likely seen me do this in recent wrap-ups. But what I really ended up liking about this was I love Celeste Ng's skill at writing stream of consciousness narratives, multi-perspective stream of consciousness narratives, where the perspectives just kind of like ebb and flow into one another, and you get a really holistic picture of the interior lives of the characters, but also how they're experiencing their exterior lives. And it's really fascinating and well developed. And I don't think anybody currently writes family dramas and like with a touch of thriller better than Celeste Ng. Like, I just think she is at the top of her craft in this way. She's still, to me, like an insta-buy author because I just really enjoy her writing and the way that she depicts things. Like, it's still very good to me. Like, everybody is flawed. If you are the type of person that likes morally gray characters in drama situations, like, check her stuff out, because even the people that you end up kind of rooting for, like, they still make mistakes and they are still flawed people. So I also really loved about this that it really, because you're in so many people's heads, and the narrative of this really surrounds like the disappearance and death of a young teenage girl and like her role within the family, and like how everybody was projecting onto her their dreams, their hopes, and like their failed futures, and like the weight of that on this one person. I thought it was such an interesting take on like how we project our dreams and goals and anything onto other people, especially if they're family, and how this can be a deeply positive but also seriously negative thing that has very intense consequences. So that's all the good about this. The reason it was a 4-star rating and not a 5 is, again, my own biases. Like, I struggle sometimes reading like family-oriented dramas because, you know what, if we're going to be completely honest, not everybody's home life is fantastic. And you are who you are as a reader because of your lived experiences. And sometimes you don't want to read about something that pushes against an old wound or bruise. So the knocking off of a star is less to do with the quality of the writing and more to do with how I received the narrative as a human being. Again, emotions. Emotions are a huge part of how we rate things, how we experience books, or any form of media. So for me, this is just a 4-star because I was like, ouch, I'm attacked. I don't like it. But I still highly recommend this book and think very, very highly of this book and Celeste Ng. I'm not mad at this. Again, it's not bad. I am happy to have read this. It just wasn't quite a 5-star. So again, we're 1 for 5 still. All right, and so for my final of my 5-star predictions, I finally read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And if you watched my recent wrap-ups, you already know I did give this a 5 stars. I'm just gonna spoil that and like not go through any of the preludes right now. Yeah, 5 stars, an easy 5 stars. I was giving this a 5-star rating in the middle of one of the worst reading slumps I've experienced in recent memory. So it's freaking good. Why I initially thought it was gonna be a 5-star was because everybody loves him. There are very few people that don't stan Brandon Sanderson if they read fantasy. He's prolific. He's transparent about his writing process, which is kind of interesting. I know that there are like some issues in general, so I'm not saying like he's perfect. This is one of Jeremy's favorite novels, and that also kind of gave me an inkling that I might enjoy it. I also really love, and this is something that Jeremy asserted with me early and often, I really love like scrappy female characters, and the main character, Vin, he was like, you're gonna love her, scrappy female character. And for him, one of his favorite elements that he really loves in storytelling is a heist. And I enjoy a heist, it's just maybe not necessarily like one of my insta-love tropes, but I was intrigued. And so I thought, like, given that, like, again, a lot of people that I really enjoy, like Becca from Becca and the Books, or, you know, Elle from Elliot Brooks, like really, really love Sanderson, and a lot of other folks too. Like a lot of people that I really respect have glowing things to say about Sanderson. So I was like, I gotta do it, and I was so scared. This is again one of those books that like scared me because I was like, okay, I'm gonna say a 5-star prediction, but I'm not prepared because I've always been the kind of person that when something is super duper hyped, there's a very stubborn, ornery part of my brain that's like, no, we're not gonna like that because we want to be different. Mission accomplished for the rest of the normative part of my brain because this blew me away. It's one of my favorite reads so far. It's a 5-star read. Again, you know, I've talked about this so frequently. I love a multi-perspective novel when it's done right. And I think Sanderson does multi-perspective novels exquisitely because he doesn't stint on the detail for these perspectives. You get so much backstory and mental headspace, and just you really are in those characters' minds in a way that's very, very satisfying for me as a reader. The heist part was very much a reason why I loved it because there was so much intricacy and intrigue. I thought the magic system was interesting, the whole idea of allomancy being like where you're burning metals that you've swallowed. When that was first described to me by other people, I was like, that sounds dumb. That sounds very dumb, but I loved it. It was fantastic. So there is like the tiniest kernel of a romance in here, which I also just found myself stunningly invested in. I was not prepared to be this invested in a romance that's paltry if compared to what I'm used to reading, but I'm here for it. And I also really love the way Sanderson writes, because I'm the type of reader that likes to put together clues. Even if I'm not consciously doing it, I make projections a lot when I'm reading. I try to figure out what's going on. It's a puzzle for me. And when the puzzle is too easily put together, I find that really dissatisfying. Because I'd like to work on it for a while. But what I think he does really, really well is he does foreshadowing expertly. He will let you as a reader try to puzzle some stuff out, and some of it you might be right, or you might just get like one portion of it to click in and the rest you'll be way off about. But it's still a very satisfying reading experience, because then he'll make you feel confident in how he got there, so it doesn't come out of complete left field and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, no. It all makes sense. So really, really satisfying read. Happy to give this 5 stars. So out of the 5 books that I predicted would be 5 stars, only 2 of them were actually 5-star ratings. I'm still not mad at this, because like, even though I was disappointed in Master of Crows, it's not like that was so much of a failure that I just want to eat it. No, it's not like that. It was disappointing because of my expectations, but it was still a 3-star read, which is not bad. I didn't get any like 2-star or 1-star reads out of this, which would have been really, really upsetting. But yeah, 4-star reads, 2 4-star reads, not too shabby. Still a really good stack of books in my opinion. And I feel like my powers of prognostication, my future seeking self is like kind of intact. Like, the things that I ended up liking make a lot of sense. Because again, scrappy female characters, consistently love that stuff. Mixed media text, love that stuff. The 2 books that I gave 5-star ratings to are also ones that like kept me puzzling over things and got really emotional reactions out of me. So that's consistent with how I like to rate books. I will definitely try to do another 5-star prediction sometime in the new year. I would be really interested in hearing from you all though, since you have heard me now ramble on about what made my 5-star or not 5-star reviews. If there are any books out there that you think, knowing me from this channel or from this video, that you think would be 5-star ratings for me, and I would be really curious to see what those are. But also no pressure, because reading is a very subjective experience. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of me or this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.